Welcome. This is character rigging for beginners. This is part 4, where we're going to be talking about setting up a basic control. Okay. We have, at this point, we've got our model, and we've got joints, and we've got our geometry bound to our skeleton so that it's deforming, and we've painted weights. We've made that look as good as we can at this point. So if there's still more stuff that you want to adjust, or you find later on down the line that your weights are a little bit off and you want to make those adjustments, you can certainly do that, which will not stop or interrupt anything that you do after the fact. That's the great thing about weight painting, is you can change them any time during the rigging process, and even after you're done rigging. An animator may pick up your rig and say, hey, this isn't working, there's some weight that seems really messed up here, and they'll send it back to you, and you can make those adjustments at that point as well. So don't fret too much if your weights are 100% perfect, or if you find later they're not 100% perfect and you've done all this work. You're not going to ruin any of the work that you've done. Okay, at this point, we've got these joints, and we can certainly move those around, and you could even animate on those. There's several problems or issues with that. One, it's hard to select joints, and when your character is bent, moving around, it's hard to know which joint you're even selecting. And not to mention the fact that none of these our rotations, and our scale is at 0 and 1, which is great, but our translation is all sorts of funky. Okay, and since this is all just an FK setup for kinematics, it doesn't allow you to plant your feet and move around. So a lot of limitations with doing it that way. So we have controls, and controls are a big part and kind of the main part of a rig to really give you the functionality and movement and manipulation that you need of your joints in ways that really make sense. So we're going to be setting up, like I said, a basic control, and this is going to be the format for pretty much every control that we use. So what we're going to do to start off with is we're going to make a NURBS curve. NURBS curves are most often what is used for the controls. You can use geometry or other objects. It's pretty default to start with curves and go and work with that. So you'll find that in most rigs they will have curves as their controls. So underneath the Curve Surfaces tab, or underneath Create NURBS Primitives, there is a circle here, and we'll just click the circle. It's going to create it right at world 0, names it NURBS Circle 1. Everything is zeroed out in 1, and yep, it's a circle. Now, you may go in and say, hey, I want to make a square. I want a square control. And so I'm going to click on this and create a NURBS square like that, and then I'll have this. It's tempting to do that, but I really advise against that, because the square tool is actually creating 4 lines, 4 separate NURBS lines that you're seeing in the outliner here. Here's my NURBS square, and here's the top, the left, the bottom, the right. So if I actually select this and try to move it, I'm just pulling the square apart, because I have multiple objects defining that square. So if you are totally dying and you're like, oh, but Mac, I really want a square, the best thing to do is just go into your NURBS circle, go to the history, that Make NURBS circle there, and just change your degree from cubic to linear, and your sections to 4. And look at that, voila! You have a square. Wonderful. Okay, so we have a square here. We'll do that and set that up. We'll just start with the square here. And even though it says it's a NURB circle, it's obviously a square. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to group this control to itself. Okay, so with the object selected, we're just going to hit Control G for a group, and now it's grouped to itself. The group is at world 0, our control is at world 0, everything is matching up, and this is kind of set up in standard practice for a basic, straightforward control. Okay, so what we want to do, we're going to be making a lot of controls here. We want to be naming them as we go because it will get really confusing to come back and rename stuff all the way through. You could easily forget what you've named stuff and have all sorts of issues. So we're going to name as we go. So the first control that we're going to make is for our root control. So we're going to change the name of our NURB circle, and we're going to call it root underscore C. Okay, so underscore C, C stands for control. You will find people naming it all sorts of different things. Underscore CTRL, underscore CC, underscore CNT, just different abbreviations for control. I like to go with the underscore C because I'm lazy and it's one letter and it saves me from typing multiple other letters. So I get it. It's a root control. C stands for control, and that's just my preference. Don't be afraid to use whatever else you want. However, when you are naming, I highly and strongly recommend using an underscore instead of a space. Maya likes this. A lot of scripts that you may use really like this, and there's issues that can arise just by having a space instead of an underscore. So that is kind of why you'll see underscores everywhere. Okay, so we'll name that root underscore C, and then its parent group, we're going to name that basically the same thing, root underscore C underscore, and we'll do a capital GRP for group. So this is our root control group. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to position our root control to be at the same position as our root joint right here. And the way that we're going to do that is by moving the parent. So we're going to grab that group that we made. We'll hit W and hold down V to vert snap, and we'll snap it right up to that joint. So vert snapping will snap to joints as well. And if your model ever gets in the way and it keeps just selecting everything else, you can always go in and just show, go to your show panel in your panel window here and just turn off polygons. And now you don't have to worry about that. It's only going to snap to that, to joints, because that's all there is to see. So back on. Okay, at this point, we now have information on that group. Okay, and that is fine. That is exactly what that group is for. This group is to protect its child, which is this root. And we'll use this group in other ways as we go into things more and more. But for now, it's just a placement. It's just to set up the control. In some cases, we'll rotate it to match the rotation of the joint that it will be controlling. And we do all this on that group control so that the child stays at 0, 0, 1, all the way down. All these default values, which are great. We want to keep that. And you may say to yourself, well, why don't we just create the control, move it in place, and then freeze the transforms once it's in place. And there's a couple of reasons why that is ill-advised. One is there are scripts and other things for animation that as you get further into rigging, it will look at controls and look at their position and try to find their world position. And when you freeze a transform, if I were to have moved that control and I freeze a transform, it basically moves your grid here for that object. It snaps it to where that object is. So now its world position is not truly where it is in the world. But if we move it all on the group and we don't freeze anything, we're not going to give the animator any access to this. It's just going to hold these values so that our root control stays at 0. And then by so doing, that root control still has true world values that we can query and find, and that scripts will use to query and find where that position is. So that is kind of the first reason. The other reason is that if we do any sort of rotation on that object and then we freeze transform it, it's going to ruin the way that orientation for those rotations are. All right? So if I create another control and I rotate it around like this, as soon as I go up and hit modify and freeze transforms, it is going to pop this back to just the world orientation right back here. Whereas if we do this on the group and we rotate it around like this, so our gimbal controls here, they're all screwed up, they're all different on the parent. And we're not so worried about that because when we go to our child now has the orientation from its parent. And its gimbal controls are defaulted into that position, which is something we really want when we're trying to really match the flow of bones. If we want to be able to rotate around the bone for twisting and things like that, we're going to want our control to follow that. So that is why we create this group, so that we can contain value on it, and we'll also use that group to manipulate objects without affecting without affecting the actual control itself, and still being able to animate on top of that. And bear with me for just a couple minutes and I will kind of show you how to do that. Okay. All right, at this point we're positioned. We're pretty good here. We may want to make this control bigger. It's kind of clipping through. And the whole point of this is to make it so we can really easily select these controls. Unlike bones, which are often tucked away, we can make these a little bit bigger. Okay, so if you are going to do any sort of manipulation on these control curves, then you're going to want to do it in a component mode. Okay, so that you're not actually scaling it on the X, Y, and Z, but we're going to move and manipulate the control points of the curve itself to have that same effect without affecting. So we're affecting our shape node as opposed to our transform node. So to learn more about that, I will have a tutorial that talks about editing curves and the different changes that you can make to those. And that will be section 4.2 if you want to check that out. Check that out. For right now, we're just going to have this. We'll select F8 to go to component mode, which is right up here. And we can see our control points here. And we'll select them all. And we'll hit R. And we'll scale those out. And maybe a little further on the x-axis there. Okay, then we'll go, see, we've made all this, and we go back to F8, and there's no scale on our actual object, just in the component. We're just moving that around. Okay, so now that we have that in place, we need to constrain. We need this to actually control this. So we're going to select our control, our root control, and shift select the root underscore SK for our skin. And we'll go up to constrain and go to parent, and we'll check the options. And we just want to make sure maintain offset is on, and that all of translate is on, and all of rotate is on, and we'll hit apply. Okay. All right. If you don't know a whole lot about constraints, no worries. Check out the video part 4.1, which talks all about constraints and all the constraints that we'll be using, and a lot of those settings more in depth. For now, if you already know about constraints, then you don't have to worry about that video. You can just keep going with this. But if you want some extra information, it's there for you to take a look at. That explains a lot of the parameters and settings of constraints and the things to expect from it. All right, so at this point, we now have, by selecting this, we now have control over our root control. Yay! Okay, perfect. Now we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to create the same setup here for our lower back, our mid back, our upper back, and we'll do one for our neck and our head, and one for our pelvis. So same process here. We're going to create a curve. We're going to group the curve to itself, so Control G. Okay, everything's at world 0. We want the control and the group all at that same pivot point, which is right here at world 0, and then we're going to name it. Okay, so this one is our lower underscore back underscore C for control, and then we can copy that and paste it for our group and just add the underscore GRP. Okay, so we have that. And then if you want, you can duplicate that. So we've got 3 of them here, and we'll just take the first one, and we're going to hit our W key and V, and we're going to snap it up to the lower back, and we'll hit F to frame it so we can get in closer and make sure that we're actually on the joint and not on the vert. Perfect. Okay, so that is there. Now we're going to select that control, right? This is what is controlling it, and shift select the lower back joint, and underneath constraint, we're going to do another parent constraint. So we've already input those settings, those are there, and now that is set up. Okay, now we're going to go to our next control, which is just duplicated the name, so we have to change the name on this. So this is going to be our mid back, and we'll change this to mid back. Okay, if you're duplicating controls, really important to go in and change your names, because Maya will make things unique if they are not already unique. So as you can see, it made the lower back control group 1 and 2, so that it was a unique name from the low back control group, which was the original. And it did that just fine. However, because these names, the children names, do not compete right away, it didn't change those names. So these, if we were to do a search for this, we would get this error. So if I were to select this, Control C, and come up here, we can change this to select by name, and we can paste that in and say, hey, select this object, Maya. We hit enter, and oh, it's given us, it's actually selected both in this case. So as opposed to getting one. But a lot of times you're going to get an error that says, hey, there's I don't know where this object is. There's more than one object fits this description, basically. So you want to make sure that you're keeping these names unique. Okay, so we'll change mid-back there, and we're going to take that mid-back group. Remember, we want to move the group, not the control. So do not click out here because we're not getting the group. Okay, if you do click out here, you can hit your up arrow key, and it will pick lock up your hierarchy. So if we hit that up key, it now selects, it has deselected the original object and it's pick locked up to its parent, which is that group. So we'll take that and we will again, with that group selected, hit hold V and go up to that joint, and we'll just hit F to frame it. There we go. Set there, and then we're going to select the control because we want the control controlling the joint and not the group. So now we select the control and shift select the mid-back joint and go to constrain and parent. You can also go underneath your rigging tab or your animation tab, and this is the parent constraint button, and you can hit that as well. So this is set up now. And then we'll go back down to, this will be our upper back. So we'll change this just to up back. We'll get rid of that 2. And then we'll go down to the actual control and rename that to upper back control. Okay, now we're going to come back. We're going to have that group selected and hit our W key for translate and hold down V to snap that up. And then we'll hit F to frame it and make sure that we're right on that joint. We are good. And this control, we could probably make that a little bit bigger. So we'll select that, hit F8 to get to our control points. Select all those and scale these up. Just so it's easier to select. F8 again to get back out of component mode and back into object mode, and we are set there. Okay, so now we're going to make one for our hips. So we will go back and we'll create another circle and hit Control G to group it. And we'll take that group and we need still another one for our neck and our head. Okay, so we'll hit Control D. So we got group 1, 2, and 3. And we'll name all of these. So this is going to be our neck control, so neck underscore C, and we can copy that and add an underscore GRP for group, and then we need a head control. So head underscore C and head underscore C underscore GRP. And then the last one will be for our hips or our pelvis. So say pelvis underscore C, and then the group will of course be pelvis underscore C underscore GRP. Awesome. Okay, now we just need to position these. So we'll grab that pelvis group. Again, we're grabbing the group, hitting V, and snapping that up here. And there we go. And we'll do the same thing and select our control and shift select those that pelvis joint and add this parent constraint. Just use button. Okay, so it's constrained it. We can make this control bigger again. Again, selecting that, hitting F8, and R for scale, and we'll scale that out like that. Okay. All right. So again, the objective of doing all this is to keep our translate, rotate, and scale all at default values, so we can easily, so the animator can easily say, oh, I need to get this back to a normal pose. I'll just zero this out, and we're fine. Okay, so that has been positioned. That has been done there, and now we're going to go to our neck group, and we're going to snap that with holding our V up to the neck. Very good. And this one control is really big, so maybe we'll make it a little smaller. And it kind of clips into the shoulders there a little bit. So maybe I'll just move this up a tiny bit, like that. So I can do all this because it's not going to affect its pivot point. So if I hit F8 again, pivot point is still in the right position. The shape is just in a slightly different spot for ease of selection. So I'll select my neck control, shift select the neck joint, and again do a parent constraint. Okay, parent constraint is on. Okay, and then we're on our last one. So here the head control, I've selected the head, but I haven't selected the group. So I'll lift up, select the group, hit W, and then hold down V to snap up to the head and frame that so I can see where my head joint is, right here. Okay, and in this case, I don't like how this control is, so I'll hit F8. And under my tool settings for my rotate tool, there's an option for step snap. I can turn that to absolute, and it's set to 45. And now I can rotate this at its pivot point twice, because I can't type in 90 degrees and get that, but I can do this step snap for my rotation. And then I can move these points up. It'll be like that. And maybe I'll grab these top ones, move these up, pinch them in, maybe offset it, kind of match her. Okay. All right. So, and now we'll select her head control and shift select her head joint. And again, parent it. Bam. Okay. That is parented. Yay. Okay, now you'll notice here we've done all of these constraints and we've set these all up, but we don't have the same hierarchy here. They're all separate. So that means that when we were grabbing our like on our arm, we could grab our shoulder, we can move it, and everything else follows along. But we've essentially broken that hierarchy. So now if I grab the lower back and I move it around, you'll notice it's not moving all the controls above it, okay? And that's because they're not a part of its hierarchy. It shouldn't move it at all. We haven't told it to do that. So we need to set these up so that they are following that FK, that forward kinematic process, okay, of following through and coming through that. So this can be a little confusing, but this is the process that we need to take. So we need to select like our head, but again we need to select its group, okay? And we're going to take that group and we're going to shift select the neck control like that and hit P to parent that, okay? So now it's like this. Now we've started getting a hierarchy here. So our head has a parent, which is the head group. That whole head group and the head control is going to be a child of our net control, just like this. And then the net control's parent is its group. So, and it's going to follow this group, control, and we're going to keep doing that down the line. So we're going to grab, again, the group of the neck and shift select the upper back and hit P to parent that. And now we're going to select the upper back's group. So we can select the control, hit our up arrow key, and then shift select the control below it, which is the mid back, and hit P to parent it. And then we're going to select our mid control again and click up. So we have its group, its parent, and then shift select the control below it and hit P. And then we're going to do the same thing with our lower back. We're going to select the lower back control, shift select the root and hit P to parent it. And now we're going to place our pelvis control group and shift select our root control and hit P. So now this is what our hierarchy should look like. Okay, running down. We have our root control group, then our root control. Lower back control group, then our lower back control. Mid back control group, and our mid back control. So it's following that process, okay? And this is what we want to see when we're setting up these first initial controls. We're basically mirroring right now the same exact parenting hierarchy that we have in joint structure, okay? And that is what we want. So if I move my parent or my root control, it moves everything. But as soon as I go to my mid or my low back here, it's not going to move its parent, so the root or the pelvis, right? And same all the way down the line. Oh, I must not have set up a constraint on my upper back. I didn't. So I'll select that. Shift select upper back bone and hit a parent constraint. Okay. And then good practice. I really prefer having my interpolation type on my constraint nodes to be set to shortest. So I'm just going to quickly do that here, and I explain why in my other tutorial. I'm just going to quickly go through and change all those settings to the shortest. Okay, that's it. That's a basic control setup right here. These are all basic. This is just a start, and our controls are gonna get more complex as we go. But this is a really good start. This should, as soon as you get these things set up, it will explain, and you'll start cementing that process in your mind. Okay, things to really watch out for as you're doing this is you, of course, want to make sure you've got no values on your actual controls, right? They're all zeroed out. And I want to make sure that I don't have any scale on anything. So my groups, no scale. I want my scale at 1 on all my groups. Okay, I don't want to be seeing that any scale on anything right now. No scale anywhere. If you were going through and you see you have a scale of 0.5 on scale Y or a scale of 0.2, you need to correct that. Okay, and sometimes correcting that means unparenting stuff if you have it, and then setting it back and then reparenting it, or if you're not sure what to do, don't be afraid to delete and just start doing it over. This part is not too hard to get all of this going. So, all right, that's it for this. I'll see you in the next part.